The cameras flicked on, studio lights blazing. Mark Levin leaned forward, jaw tight, eyes narrowed like a lion ready to pounce. Before Jasmine Crockett could finish her second sentence, Levin exploded. "You don't get to lecture me on the Constitution." The sound hit like thunder. Viewers leaned closer. His voice ricocheted across the studio, sharp, aggressive, desperate. But Crockett, she didn't even blink. Her stillness became the counterpunch. Slowly, deliberately, she tilted her head, eyes locked on him. A smile ghosted across her lips. The silence stretched. Levin's tirade grew louder, each word tumbling over the next, like a storm that had already lost control. And if you're gripped already, don't miss the rest of this showdown. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, so you don't miss a single political clash that flips the script. "I'm not here for a lecture either, Mr. Levin," Crockett said calmly, but he talked right through it, louder now. As if decibels could win a debate, the tension was so thick. A producer, watching from behind the glass, muttered, "He's spiraling already." What was supposed to be a serious conversation about police reform had crumbled into an on-air ambush. Levin had invited her to debate her bill, but this wasn't a debate, it was an attempted takedown, only it wasn't working, because Crockett didn't flinch, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg for the floor, she simply waited. And when Levin finally paused to sip water, half mocking, half daring her to speak, she leaned in slowly and asked, "Would you like me to answer something? Or are you just interviewing yourself today?" The people behind the broadcast booth gasped, not because it was loud, because it cut, because it was sharp. Levin opened his mouth for another hit, but something stalled. The balance had just shifted, and he knew it. The interview was only 3 minutes in, but already he was losing control. Hours before the interview began, Mark Levin was already treating it like a victory lap. He skimmed a few headlines about Jasmine Crockett, tossed them aside, and told his producers not to worry. "She's just another loud liberal with no answers," he said. "I'll handle it." His team tried to warn him. "This one's different. She's not coming in to play defense," but Levin waved them off with the same arrogance that he'd used to bulldoze guests for years. His formula. It hadn't failed him yet. Talk louder, control the tempo, and drown the other person in his own conviction. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Crockett was running through her own prep, but it looked nothing like his. She wasn't memorizing talking points. She was reviewing transcripts of Levin's toughest interviews. She was studying his patterns, the way he cut people off, the way he repeated certain phrases to unnerve guests, the way he used speed to unsettle calm voices, and she rehearsed, not for surprise questions, but for interruptions. Her team took turns shouting over her responses, mocking, spinning, jabbing.
To understand why this clash mattered, you have to see beyond the noise. Mark Levin wasn't just interrupting Jasmine Crockett. He was relying on the very tactic that had defined his public persona for years. His method was simple: overwhelm, talk over, dominate by sheer force of sound. For his followers, it was proof of strength. For his critics, it was a sign of insecurity disguised as authority. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another guest in Levin's storm. She represented something larger, something that cut through the noise, the idea that dignity, intellect, and patience still have a place in American discourse. She carried the weight of being not only a rising political figure, but also a voice for those long dismissed, talked over, and pushed aside. For many in the audience, she stood as a mirror, reflecting every immigrant, every woman, every community that had ever been told to sit quietly, while someone else claimed the stage. The stakes weren't confined to that studio. This was about how America chooses to value its voices. Do we reward the loudest? Or do we honor the ones who wait, listen, and then strike with truth? Levin, red-faced and relentless, believed he had already won. Each interruption felt like a victory lap, each dismissal like a final word. What he could not see, what the audience was starting to feel, was that Crockett's silence wasn't surrender. Her restraint was a kind of power he couldn't recognize. And when she finally chose to use her voice, the entire balance of power in the room would shift in a single second. Mark Levin had built his career on the theater of outrage. To his listeners and viewers, He was the warrior at the microphone, always ready to bulldoze through opponents with volume and fury. His style wasn't to persuade, but to overwhelm, to pound every point into the ground until no one dared challenge him. He was the kind of figure who turned interruption into an art form. And for years, it worked. His audience admired the fire. They saw him as a fighter, someone unafraid to say it like it is. He knew the rhythm of confrontation so well that it felt choreographed. The pointed finger, the raised voice, the cutting dismissal before an opponent could even finish their thought. It was his brand, and it had made him untouchable in many conservative circles. But that same approach carried cracks he never acknowledged. Beneath the booming confidence was a dependency. He needed the noise. Without it, he risked exposure. Calm, measured responses unsettled him because they left him with nothing to push against. The louder he grew, the more he revealed his own reliance on control. On that stage with Crockett, Levin believed he was playing a familiar role, setting the tempo, drowning her out before she could build momentum. He mistook her silence for defeat, her composure for weakness. In his mind, he had already won. And Crockett, steady and unshaken, was preparing to turn his signature weapon against him. To understand why Jasmine Crockett's composure carried such weight, you have to trace the path that brought her here. Long before she faced down Mark Levin's interruptions, she was carving her way through rooms where her voice wasn't welcomed, where her very presence challenged the old order. Her training as a lawyer shaped her into someone who could spot weakness in a case before the other side even realized it existed. In courtrooms, patience was her sharpest tool. She knew the value of letting an opponent talk themselves into a corner, the discipline of waiting until the exact moment when one precise question, one precise fact could dismantle everything. That discipline never left her. But Crockett's story wasn't only about the law. It was about resilience. As a black woman in politics, she carried the scars of being underestimated and dismissed. People had tried to shout her down before. Colleagues, commentators, opponents who believed that volume equaled authority. Every time she learned that silence can be a weapon, that composure can unsettle the arrogant more than any raised voice ever could. That history gave her a calmness that seemed almost unshakable. She had been the first in the room before, the lone challenger, the underestimated newcomer. She knew what it felt like to be counted out. And she knew how powerful it was to rise in those moments. Sitting across from Levin, she wasn't just another guest trying to get a word in. She carried the weight of communities that had been silenced, the pride of those who demanded a fair hearing. Her very presence was a rebuke to the idea that only the loudest deserve attention. Every second Levin interrupted her, Crockett's silence gathered strength. She wasn't retreating, she was preparing. The years of practice, the lessons of the courtroom, the lived reality of being pushed aside, all of it converged in that moment. And when she finally chose to speak, it wouldn't just be her words that landed. It would be every lesson, every struggle, every ounce of resilience behind them. Levin thought he was winning. In truth, Crockett was about to deliver a blow years in the making. The rhythm of the clash grew harsher with every exchange. Levin interrupted once, twice, then again, barely allowing Crockett to shape a full sentence. His tone sharpened like a blade, rising in pitch, layered with contempt. He leaned forward, fists pressing the table, his words snapping like whips meant to break her composure. The audience felt the imbalance. One voice filled the room, smothering the other. Levin believed that if he controlled the tempo, he controlled the truth. Every time Crockett drew a breath, he lunged in, cutting her off before she could anchor her point. It was the same tactic that had carried him through countless debates, an avalanche of noise, designed to bury anyone who dared stand against him. But Crockett wasn't flustered. She let the storm run its course, eyes steady, her silence measured. Each interruption became another rope he wrapped around himself, another mark against his credibility. The more Levin pressed, the more transparent his desperation became. Tension stretched across the studio. Some in the audience shifted in discomfort. sensing the unfairness of the exchange. Others leaned in, waiting for Crockett to snap, to rise to his volume. Yet she didn't. She refused to hand him the chaos he craved. Then it happened. Levin's interruptions peaked, his words spilling over into near incoherence. He had boxed himself into a corner, thinking Crockett had no escape. But her restraint wasn't weakness. It was strategy. With the room's energy stretched to breaking, Crockett prepared to strike. 1 second, one line, one perfectly timed response, and the entire debate would pivot. What came next would freeze Levin, mid-sentence, and send the audience into stunned silence. The studio had become a storm of noise, Levin's interruptions, stacking on top of each other until they blurred into one long tirade. He believed he had crushed her voice, carved her presence down to silence. But Jasmine Crockett had been waiting. She leaned forward ever so slightly, the kind of movement that shifts the entire energy of a room. Her eyes locked on him, unwavering, and when she spoke, the words were not shouted. They were scalpel sharp. "Are you finished proving my point?" The line cut through the air like a bell tolling in an empty cathedral. The roar of Levin's voice collapsed into silence. His mouth hung open, his argument suspended mid-sentence. The momentum ripped from his grasp in an instant. The entire exchange flipped upside down in that 1 second. For the audience, it was electric. Gasps filled the studio. Some clapped, others froze, processing what they had just witnessed. On social media, clips of that moment would later be replayed again and again, the instant when noise met precision and lost. Levin tried to recover, but his authority was fractured. The force of his interruptions had been exposed as weakness. His strategy dismantled by a single line that showed his aggression wasn't power. It was insecurity. Crockett's calm delivery magnified the blow. And what followed that 1 second takedown would ripple far beyond the studio walls, the silence after. Crockett's line didn't stay contained in that studio. Within minutes, the clip began circulating online. First, a few stunned viewers posted it with captions like, "She ended him in 1 second," or "This is how you deal with bullies." Then it spread like wildfire, shared across platforms, dissected by commentators, replayed in slow motion to capture the exact moment Levin froze. On Twitter, hashtags erupted. Rocks Crockett clapback, silence the noise, 1 second victory. Memes paired Levin's stunned expression with captions mocking his bluster. TikTok edits looped the mic drop line over dramatic music, turning it into a viral anthem of resistance. The reaction was bigger than politics. It was cultural. Levin's defenders scrambled. Some tried to downplay the exchange. Others blamed editing, but the image was unshakable. The interruptions that once defined him now marked his downfall. The shockwaves weren't just online. In coffee shops, classrooms, and family living rooms, people replayed the clip, pointing to it as proof that arrogance can fall with the lightest push. Crockett's moment wasn't a skirmish. It was a symbol. In the days that followed, the viral moment took on a meaning far larger than the clash itself. It wasn't just about Mark Levin being silenced. Jasmine Crockett's 1 second takedown became a parable for anyone who had ever been talked over, dismissed, or denied their space. Her calm, deliberate response showed that true strength doesn't need to shout. Power isn't in the volume of your voice, but in the clarity of your words. And when delivered with precision, a single sentence can topple a mountain of noise. For Crockett, it wasn't about winning a sparring match. It was about exposing a deeper truth, that respect must be earned, not demanded. And as that 1 second moment replayed across the nation, it stood as a simple but powerful truth. When arrogance meets dignity, arrogance always falls. But the story didn't end there. The final twist of this showdown was yet to come. One last moment that would tie everything together. Mark Levin thought interruption was control. He believed that if he shouted loud enough, long enough, he could bury Jasmine Crockett's voice beneath his noise. But in the end, it took only 1 second to prove him wrong. 1 second where silence broke into precision, where arrogance crumbled, and where dignity claimed the room. It wasn't just a political spat. It was a reminder that calm, truth still has power in a world addicted to chaos. Crockett's line lives on because it showed something universal. You don't need to match aggression to defeat it. You don't need to mirror arrogance to expose it. Sometimes the strongest weapon you have is composure, sharpened into a single sentence. For everyone who has ever been interrupted, dismissed, or told their voice doesn't matter, this moment is yours too. Crockett showed that no matter how loud the noise gets, clarity always finds a way through. Her victory belongs to every immigrant, every woman, every underdog who refuses to be silenced. And that's why this story matters beyond politics. It's a reminder of who we are when we choose respect over ridicule, truth over noise, courage over intimidation. So if you believe in lifting up those voices, if you believe in celebrating moments where dignity wins, this is the place for you. Subscribe, share this story, and join a community that refuses to let arrogance define the conversation. Together, we amplify the voices that matter. Because sometimes history doesn't turn in hours or years. Sometimes it shifts in just 1 second. And the next second, the one that belongs to all of us, is still being written.